Okay, section one, we are going to start going over the site settings. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through all of the buttons. I'm not going to actually fill out any information unless it's required. Sometimes you have to fill out information in order to get to the next step. If that is the case, then I'm going to leave filling that out for the next section, the section 2 in this course. But for right now, let's just get familiar with what we have in the sections. So to do that, let's go over the dojo and have a look. All right, so now we're on the Shopify dashboard. So the first thing we want to do is we're going to go over the settings. So let's click on settings and let's bring up the page. The reason I am starting with settings is because generally speaking, the settings are used to generate other places out in the store. So it takes this information and it generates out things like your privacy policy and your terms of service. It will use your address and information you've entered in here in order to make sure that that information is correct. Kind of speeds up the flow, but it doesn't work unless you've set up your settings. So let's go over the pieces that we have in our settings page. So first is our store details. These are things like basic information. So we're going to have your store name. We're going to have the industry that you're in. We're going to have your address where you are located. We're going to have your contact information. So this is both contact information for Shopify to contact you, as well as for customers to contact you through your website. We've got your store currency. What is your default currency that they're going to connect to your bank account? You're going to have your standards and formats. So what your time zone is, what your unit system is, what your weight system is. And then we have your invoicing prefixes. So these are the invoices, prefixes, and suffixes around your invoice numbers. So your invoice numbers will continue to increment up as you sell more stuff. But if you're going to be integrating it with another system, and you may potentially have a situation where they are incrementing on your other system as well, and they may be out of sync, you definitely want to use a prefix or a suffix in order to make sure that those those invoice numbers are unique. Being unique when it comes to invoice numbers is super, super important. If not, when you install a connector, you're going to get conflicts and then you're going to have to sort them out. So in my case, I have added in ecom dash, and then the invoice numbers are going to go over that. We're going to go over that more in section 2 when we do the setup. All right, coming down. Next, we have our plan. This is pretty straightforward. This is your Shopify plan. This is what you're going to pay to Shopify. So when we're talking about plans, I'm going to go and explain how each plan is decided on which one you should pick when you're building your store. Again, we're going to cover that in section 2. Billing. So this is a billing page that Shopify is going to show you all of your spending, everything that you have spent with them. It's going to have your payment methods, your billing currency, your subscriptions, your bills, your credits, and your statements of charges. All of that stuff can be found underneath billing. All right, moving on to users and permissions. So Shopify gives you access to set up immense amount of control over who gets to see what. Maybe you want one user just to manage one single app. You can do that. You can have a user who only manages orders. All of that stuff is available for you to articulate through the orders and permissions page. You can add new staff members and you can add collaborators. Now, collaborators are important. If you decide to work with a Shopify expert, that Shopify expert will have a collaborator access. So they will send you a request, and you can and they can have access to your store. You can actually restrict how much access they have, just like you had with regular users. Most importantly, it doesn't come off your user count. Now, your user count is dependent on which package you are on with Shopify. Collaborators don't affect that. So you could be working with 30 or 40 Shopify partner collaborators and it won't affect your staff count. So you won't be required to upgrade your account just to work with an expert. And then login services. If you are using a login service like Google Apps or Facebook or Twitter or something like that, you can enable that down there. So if your organization is working with Google Workspace, then you can set it up so that they can authenticate through to Shopify and you don't need to set up separate passwords for them as well. This is really great as you start to scale your business. All right, moving over to payments. Payments is where we are going to be setting up our payment provider. So if we originally wanted to collect credit card information from our customers, this is where we would go activate Shopify Payments. Now, activating Shopify Payments is going to allow you to put in your bank account transit number, routing number and account number, and then they will deposit it directly into your account. Now, this is really only available wherever Shopify payments are available. Now, I know that Shopify has been very aggressive at getting Shopify payments into as many countries as possible, and they're onboarding new countries every month. So if you don't yet have Shopify payments in your country, just give it a little bit of time. It will be there. They are very, very focused on getting that happen. Now, there are other payment methods that you can subscribe to. So say Shopify Payments isn't available in your area and you want to add a payment provider. Say you're using something like authorize.net. Well, you can do that in here as well. So if you've already set up an e-commerce provider and you want to be able to accept credit cards and you want to use it inside of Shopify, you can go and do that and set that up in here. We have PayPal, and most importantly, we have manual billing methods. So manual billing methods allow you to add in something like we can take bank deposits, we can have a custom method. So we can have a custom method. So if you want to have a drop off or COD, you can do that. You can do money orders. You can create whatever kind of custom payment that you have in here. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that payments are available for all users. So setting up a custom payment will show up on everybody user's checkout unless you're on Shopify Plus. I'll leave a special section where we'll talk about what Shopify Plus is used for, but we won't go over that in this particular video. All right, moving on to checkout and accounts. So checkout and accounts, this is where we are going to configure your account settings. So this allows you to, whether you want to capture account usage when they sign up or when they check out. So say you have a product that requires you to authorize whether or not somebody signs up for that you must capture their account. This is going to add friction to your checkout process, but there are certain business cases where you do need that. Now, I can talk about Sunbowl a little bit here. We have a requirement that people have to read our contract and sign up before they can purchase stuff from us. That's why we have customer accounts set up as required. Now, I would not recommend this as a direct-to-consumer brand unless it was a higher-end brand where you already had some demand coming to it. Okay, customer URLs. This is a relatively new addition to Shopify, but it allows you to put in a business URL. So when you send someone an invoice, they can actually go through a specific domain name to get to the checkout. So it might be different than your front end customer. This is where we're going to go through this. We will talk about this a little bit more when we do the setup for the live store in section 2. But if you're curious about how to use business to business Shopify for B2B, I'm going to leave a link right down below here where you can go and check that out because I've done a number of videos on B2B stuff. Coming down, we have our customer contact method, how you want customers to contact you. This will be put on the thank you pages and your email notifications, so you can say phone numbers or emails. This is for the customer on how they wish to be contacted. So you can either select it has to be email or by phone or email. Okay. Customer name, these are required fields that you need to set up. So whether you only require the last name, whether you require first and last name, this is how you make sure that the data that you're collecting from your customers is the data that you need. Now, generally speaking, most of these things are pretty self-explanatory, but company name, address line 2, shipping address, and phone number. Because of the pandemic, Shopify added in the ability to add tipping at checkout. So this is where you would go and add that tipping process in there. All right, coming down to order processing. So order processing, this has a couple options here. While the customer is checking out, you use the shipping address and the billing address by default. So by default, it's going to use both of them. If you uncheck this, it will ask them for them independently, so they'll have to figure them out, or they'll have to fill them out separately. If they're going to use auto address auto completion, generally speaking, this is probably a good thing to keep connected. But it may you may be in a place where autocomplete doesn't work really well. Google Maps doesn't work perfectly everywhere in the world. All right. After an order has been paid, this is where we get to decide how we want to manage the order. If a order has been fulfilled and paid, we can set it to automatically archive. Sometimes we don't want to do that. Maybe we want to make sure that they stay live. We will go over all of these things for in section 2. Consent for marketing, this is where we set that up. Abandoned checkout emails, again, this is where we're going to be setting up the abandoned checkout email. That is what we're going to cover in section 3. and then order status page. So order status page, this is where we would install any kill pixels or pixels that say that the person has indeed finished the conversion. So conversion pixels, things that you would have inside of Google to say, yes, a sale has actually gone through. That is what's going to go on the order status page. There are a number of apps that we have used in the past that use that order status page to do like post checkout surveys and stuff like that. That's where that stuff gets done. All right, so shipping. And once we're on the shipping page, Shopify works shipping in different profiles. So Shopify might have a profile for a specific product type that requires a specific amount of shipping. And then you can apply a different product to a different profile. One product can only be member of one profile. So you can't have a product that's a member of multiple profiles. But this shipping is where we would go and configure all of that stuff. Taxes and duties. Now, Shopify does its best to provide boilerplate for taxes of your local area. But again, taxes change often, so this is where you would go in and set all of that sort of stuff up. Next is locations. So locations are different locations that you have inside of your organization. So say you have a store and it has 2 locations in town. This is where you would set them up. We will get into this when we're talking about fulfillment later, when we are going to be fulfilling different from different areas. Gift cards is a pretty self-explanatory. This is a place where you go and configure your gift cards. Markets. Shopify Markets is a way for you to promote your products on other markets. We will go through this in a special module, but this is where that is all configured. Apps and sales channels. So now, if you remember back to the first video, the apps drawer and the sales channel drawers, this is a drill down of the settings that are in there, and we will go through those separately. The last couple ones here is domains. So this is where we're going to go to connect our domain. Custom events. Custom events is a new thing that has just been added into Shopify. It allows you to add tracking pixels directly in the dashboard and set it to the theme. The benefit of this is if you add a pixel through this theme, then what happens is when you change themes, you don't have to copy that code over and your pixels continue to work. That way you don't have to worry about removing a pixel accidentally. Branding, this is where we're going to set up our branding. So we're going to set up our logos, we're going to set up our colors, our cover images, our slogans, our short descriptions. We're going to go through all of this when we set up the store in section 2. All right, on to notifications. Notifications these are the default notifications that come from Shopify. So these are, your order confirmations, your edited order, your order invoices. We're going to go through and customize each one of these to make sure that they're set up exactly the way that we want. And then we have some delivery and some local pickup and customer notifications. Basically, all of the notifications that you need. Now, one of the things that is hidden inside of notifications is your webhooks. So right at the bottom, very, very bottom of the page is a notification for webhooks. And webhooks are used in order to connect 2 softwares together. One of the most common is Zapier. Zapier is a robot SaaS software, which allows you to basically automate some of the processes. So say, for example, when an order comes through, you want to send an order to a printing company that's going to print a custom sticker and then ship it to you or something like that. That's what you would use a webhook for. If you're using custom apps, that's all done in there. There's a section that I'm going to put together specifically for webhooks. And then finally, if you have any notifications to your phones or any of your other devices, those are set up all through notifications. Okay. Meta fields. Now there is a lot of stuff to go over under meta fields. Meta fields are custom fields for products, pages, variants. This is a completely full different section that we will get into later on. I'm just going to show you right now. This is where you would go to configure those custom fields. So this is where you configure products, orders, blogs, blog posts, that sort of things. Relatively new shipment that just came out. Sections Everywhere only came in 2022. So it is a really welcomed update. And we're still getting new updates on it all the time. Files, this is access to the Shopify CDN. So those of you who don't know what a CDN is, it's a content delivery network. And what this does is it propagates your files around the globe so that when somebody is in Europe and they download the file, they're downloading it from the European server instead of the one in, say, California or Ottawa. It keeps the files closer to the customers. This is where you would go and manage all of those files. We're going to be using this for a lot of our assets later on. Languages, this is where we would be able to set up multiple languages. It also allows us to change the default language that we have set inside of Shopify. So if we see something that's written and we don't like the language that is being used there, we can go in and we can change that so that, custom Shopify buttons like on the checkout and stuff like that can say something different than having it to say what the default is. And finally, we have reach policies. So this is our refund policy, privacy policy, terms and service, shipping policy, and contact information. This is what we are going to use those settings in the beginning in the store details to generate out, and we're going to go over all of that. All right, I realized that was a lot of stuff to go through. That is one of the biggest sections that there is. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to move on to talking about those menu items on the left-hand side of the store, starting with orders. That's where we're going to begin. Now we might bounce around a little bit depending on what is the next thing to go through, but I'm going to go through all of the language first, and then once we get over to doing building out the store in section 2, then we're going to start going back and forth between products and orders and all sorts of stuff. All right, so stick around and we'll get to the next section right away.